So, hi everyone. I'm Keji. I'm from the UK. What you're observing there is what happens when you take a keynote slide, convert it to PowerPoint, and things go wrong. So apologies. There's meant to be some GIFs, some emojis showing you that I'm from the UK. I'm also Nigerian, and the little bird is that I'm a Liverpool fan. So that's trying to tell you. Um, it's really great to be here. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. Some of what I've done before, I've been in tech for about 17 years, and for about 12 of those, I've been a product manager, product person. I've worked in lots of B2B SaaS companies that you've probably never heard of, mostly in edtech. I worked with a company called Talis. We took two edtech products to market-leading positions in the UK and also in multiple markets in APAC and in Norway and the States a little bit. And that company got acquired by a very large educational publisher, academic publisher called Sage. And then I've helped to embed product thinking and product practices into small startups and scale-ups and a couple of larger organizations. I consider myself to be very early in my product leadership journey. So I went back to that company that got acquired to take my first product leadership role. And more recently, I work at the Financial Times, which is where I'm at the moment. So that's a little bit of what I've done. I'm also a community organizer. I ran a meetup called Product Tank for many, many years. I also was a facilitator for 80 Product Tank meetups around Europe. And also, I like to mentor people, so I really like kind of building community and working with developing product people. So if anyone has any interest in product management, I'd very much recommend the Product Tank meetups. They're very good. So, the last time I did this talk was the very first time I'd ever done any talk on a quite big stage. And so I compared it then to what it felt like to jump out of a plane for the first time. It was very scary and terrifying. It was really exciting to be invited, but it was kind of one of the most exciting and one of the most terrifying things that I'd done at the time. This isn't the first time that I jumped out of a plane. This is the second time I jumped out of a plane. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is, even after the first, second, or third time you do something, it can still be scary, but here I am. I like to do scary things, so I'm doing this talk again. And so what I'm going to talk to you today about is Gremlins. Has anyone here seen this movie? Yes, okay, it's universally beloved, I hope. So there's this 80s movie about this thing called a mogwai, this guy here, his name's Gizmo, and there's 3 rules to, stopping chaos from happening. Avoid bright light, sunlight kills them, don't get them wet, don't feed them after midnight. But you, of course, all know what happens. They broke all the rules. This poor guy ended up creating like a multitude of gremlins. They fed them after midnight, and this happened. And so what I want to talk to you about is the gremlins that I think plague us professionally. That's the link that I'm making here. So when I watched this movie, so when I did the talk the first time, I watched the movie, which I think is always a bit of a problematic thing to do when you watch any 80s movie. You never know what kind of problematic tropes there might be. So in this movie, there was some very dodgy references to Asian culture. The only black guy in the movie dies first, that kind of problematic thing. But mostly, it was great. And I remember the Gremlins as being kind of mischievous, mostly fun and harmless. But then when I rewatched it, I realized that it wasn't actually that harmless. They caused a ton of chaos. This small little town, unsuspecting town, was completely destroyed. I'm pretty sure a lot of people had serious trauma after this one night where these guys went crazy, and they loved to party. Before doing the extended version of the talk that I'm going to do today, I watched Gremlins 2. There was a whole new batch. This time it was in an office building. It was a bit less problematic, but what did I learn? This time I learned that they're still troublesome. They also found some external factors. So they found a lab. They started like drinking formulas, and they ingested things that basically then aggravated everything. So they multiplied, continued to multiply, and they became more troublesome with these external factors. It made them a lot harder to kill. The film itself had some very dubious plot points. I can suspend my disbelief for a lot of things, but the electric gremlin that kind of goes in the wires, I could not get on board with that one. So that's the only thing I'd say about that. But I did learn some things from the second film, which is about what happens when there are outside influences affecting the gremlins. And the lesson there was that it causes them to kind of multiply and become more sophisticated and much harder to get rid of. And so what I want to talk, and they still like to party as well. I'd quite like to party with them. So what I want to talk today about is if you're a product person, what are your product management gremlins? And just generally, I think they're applicable to any profession, any of our roles. What are the kinds of professional gremlins that we're all facing? So basically, I think that everyone has gremlins. I don't think it's unusual. It's actually quite normal. What's also quite normal is we don't really tend to talk about them in a professional setting. I think that what I'd like to do is talk you through 4 sets, and there's more than 4, but 4 sets of gremlins that I think are pretty prevalent, that kind of plague us in our day-to-day work, that restrict our development and can make us not perform at our best. And then I'd also like to present 4 antidotes, 4 sets of antidotes that I found from my personal experience to help with these things. So none of what I'm saying here is prescriptive. I've not done any research on it. This is from my own lived experience. And don't feel like anything I'm saying here, you have to do everything, otherwise you're not doing it right. It's absolutely not that. If you do one thing, you're probably going to help. It's going to help. So I want all of us to feel more comfortable to talk more openly about the gremlins that we're facing, because I think that's kind of how it helps us to get through them better. So that's what I'm going to talk us through today. So what I did want to talk about, though, is, and I didn't do this the first time round, but the Gremlins 2 gave me the inspiration, is so contact with water and food after midnight are the things that kind of make things go crazy. And there's aggravating external factors. So if you take contact with water and food after midnight, and then all the formulas that the gremlins added to that, and the chaos ensued, what's our version of that? What's our version of contact with water and food after midnight? And throw in some kind of chemical formula. What's going to make our gremlins aggravated, make them multiply, make them harder to get rid of? And so I've been kind of thinking about what is it that we're all absorbing all the time. So here's where we're going to do some audience participation. Nothing too crazy, just have a think about this question. How do you keep up to date with your industry, your discipline, best practice? How are you learning? And then put your hand up, feel free to put your hand up if, no pressure though, any of these are in your information diet. So who's signed up to like far too many Substacks that they can't keep up with? Or reading Medium blogs, or any other kind of like blogs or articles about your discipline? Who's got a stack of books that they're constantly working their way through? I'm hoping that's, yep. Excuse me. Who is on LinkedIn now? Like, has LinkedIn replaced your Twitter diet? And are you following far too many LinkedIn influencers now? Yes. And who's got like a ton of podcasts? Like, I cannot keep up with the episodes of the podcasts that I listen to. Just impossible. Okay, so all of these things are in our information diet. We're consuming all of this stuff all the time, and it's great. We're people who want to learn, who want to develop, we want to hear what other people are doing, and so that's a good thing. I'm not saying that this information diet is a bad thing, but I do think that what can happen in this consuming this information diet is we start to absorb these dialogues about how we should be, what good looks like, what the best is, and we can sometimes you can feel a little bit called out, like this is not what's happening where I am, and you can start to internalize some of that. So there's a very famous article called Good Product Manager, Bad Product Manager by Ben Horowitz. Has anyone heard of that? No? Okay. It's a 26-year-old article, and it basically presents what good product managers are and what bad product managers look like. And it's not a bad article. I think it's trying to serve a good purpose. But I also think it could potentially be damaging in some ways. But more than that original article from 26 years ago, there's been so many riffs of this. Till this day, there are people riffing on this article. So I've put, rather than product manager there, I've put job title, because what you can do is insert whatever your role is into there, and I guarantee you there's a version of that article. So when we've got these kind of narratives of good this versus bad this, and are you a good this, and if you're not doing these things, you're a bad this, I don't really think that that's helpful. I think let's try and frame these things as this is how we can improve, rather than you're being bad if you're being something. I went on Medium and did a search for this, and there were at least 50 versions of this that I saw before I got tired of saying refresh and show me more. And so we've got narratives like that coming into play. I'm going to read you a quote, but I need to go over here and look at my notes to do that. So there's a climate at the moment of spicy takes and tough love and hard truths for, I think, product managers and lots of other roles. So in the current economic climate, the impact on the tech sector, the layoffs that we're seeing, the advent of Gen AI, it's creating a lot of turbulence and uncertainty, alongside opportunity and hopefulness as well, I think. But some of the discourse that we're having falls into this category of spicy takes and hard truths and tough love for people. And so I'm going to read you a quote from a product leader who's quite famous in the product management circles. And it goes like this: I've been warning for several years that delivery team, product owners, and feature team product managers are likely to be facing a reckoning as companies realize that these roles are not what they thought they were. From what I can tell, that reckoning has begun, and I'm expecting Gen AI will only compound this. There's no question that a lot of companies overhired during the pandemic. That was easy to see even while it was going on. And it's not just that they overhired, a lot of them lowered the bar. So that's one of those spicy takes. And I'm not trying to call anyone out here. I actually think this discourse is important. But the way that that is phrased, I think, could be potentially damaging. It's saying that people lowered the bar, but they're the people who hired the people in the first place. So that's an example of kind of some of the climate of what we're reading. If that information diet that we talked about, that's what you're consuming, you're probably getting whatever your version of these sort of spicy takes are. And so for me, I think there's more than one side to everything. There is another side to the discourse, and it's captured by this sentiment from a guy called John Cutler, where he basically talks about what is going on and how it's making people feel. People are tired, people feel in limbo, people are questioning themselves, their companies, their craft. It's not the rate of the change that is truly gripping people, it's the tension of that change. And I just really love that statement. I think this is someone who captures what the first person was trying to say, but comes at it from a different place. And so this climate of spicy takes and tough love, it's important to talk about this. It's important to talk about the conditions, the circumstances that led to where we are in the industry. It's important to talk about how we can improve, how we can build better products, and the ways that we do that. It's important to talk about the choices organizations have made at a different time, economic climate, and how that's now transpiring into this economic climate. But I think I think that there is a way to do this whilst also acknowledging that there are organizational flaws in the design of organizations and the structural failures that contribute to why someone might end up being a good product manager versus a bad product manager, or whatever the equivalent is. Are our organizations designed to help us work in the best ways? So when you frame things in terms of these companies are the best and this is the rest and this is what the best do versus what the rest do, I think it's a little bit unnuanced and needs to have a bit more nuance to that. So I think that we need to hold empathy front and center in this climate. And going back to John Cutler, I thought this was a really good way to kind of to speak to that. So it's crucial to be empathetic, sensitive, and help in genuine ways. The default ways we're used to helping in might not even be useful right now, so it's important to be self-aware. We all need someone to listen and not to lecture. And so I just wanted to talk about kind of what I think are the contact with water, the food after midnight, and then throw in the added kind of aggravating factors. I think that climate is what we're all consuming, and that may lead to some of the gremlins that we're going to talk about. So let's meet some of the gremlins. So the first couple of gremlins that we're going to talk about are comparison and self-doubt. Now, these guys are what happens when you get into a feature shootout with yourself. In product management, we talk about not getting into a competitive feature shootout, which means you're just looking at what your competitors are doing, and then you're trying to do that, and you're all just racing to the bottom. But this is what happens when you're doing that with yourself. So before I get into how this shows up, this dynamic tag team, I think these two are basically the biggest crazy makers that you can engage in, and really the foundation and base level gremlins for all the others that I'm going to talk about. So if you start here, this is where everything else kind of comes from, or that's what I found in my experience. So I really love this definition of comparison from Brené Brown. It's a book called Atlas of the Heart. It's the crush of conformity from one side and competition from the other. So you're simultaneously trying to fit in, but stand out. And that's a real tension that you're going through when you're constantly comparing yourself. So how does this show up? It manifests when you're worried about whether you're doing the thing you do well compared to the best companies, the Silicon Valley companies, or the big deal companies that everyone talks about. It manifests when you are not present in your day job. You're getting frustrated by the constraints that you have. You're wondering whether your craft is at the level that it should be. It manifests in, trying to implement change in an organization that's not ready for it. So, for example, I've gotten frustrated when I've tried to do experimentation in an organization that actually doesn't have the scale to do so. It's like, I know this is something that good product people do, and I'm not doing it, so I'm going to try and do it here. Actually, it's not the most appropriate thing to do here, but I'm the one who's feeling frustrated, and everyone else is wondering why that is, and I'm feeling like I'm not good at my job. And it's indiscriminate, so it means that you will try to do everything. You're learning, you're reading all these books, you're consuming all this content, you're learning about how the best people do it, and so you want to implement that. So I've been very, very guilty of being the Oprah of frameworks, And my teams have been very frustrated because I've been like, try this framework, try that framework. I have learned my lesson, but in the early days of my product management life, this is what I was doing. And also, I think that comparison and self-doubt shows up for you if you are from any kind of underrepresented group. So you start to wonder whether you should be in the room, whether everyone else is thinking that, whether everyone else thinks you only got into the room because of your underrepresentation. And so that starts to set in as well. You start to wonder if you should be there, if you're the only one who's thinking this, if everyone else is thinking this. And so comparison and self-doubt really sets in. And so that's, sorry, I should go back there. That's the first set of gremlins. They are, I think, the ones that probably challenge us the most, and the rest of them really kind of build up off of there. So the second set are the progression wall gremlins, and this is about how you think about progressing your career, learning new skills, figuring out what new skills you want. So what does that look like? How does that show up? So this is one of those things that everyone faces. It doesn't matter whether you're at the start of your career, whether you've actually progressed through your career, there's always going to be a new level that you're trying to learn and grow at. So it doesn't matter what role you're in, everyone's going to hit kind of the progression wall at some point. So you might feel like you are stuck where you are. You might feel that there's no opportunities. This might feel like the organization that you're in doesn't have the space for you to grow. You're hitting the limit of your growth within that organization. That might also feel like you don't know how to progress, so you're not sure what the skills are that you want to progress in, or you're not sure what the right kind of organization to help you progress is. Which type of organization should you go to? Should it be a small one, a large one? Should you work in a company that's doing this kind of products versus that kind of product? Just that fogginess about how do you actually continue to progress and learn new skills. And then I think there's always the fear as well, particularly if you're somewhere where you feel limited or somewhere that you're ready to leave. There's always that little fear about, well, is it really different anywhere else? I don't know if anyone's ever felt that at the point where they're thinking of going for a new job or trying for a new role. You wonder if it's what's really going to change when you go to the next role. And this can also be the thing that keeps you in your comfort zone. So the progression wall can also show up for you where actually you're doing a really great job, you're enjoying what you're doing, the things are comfortable, and so you stay comfortable and you don't think about kind of what to do next. And that can be the easy thing to do. So the progression wall shows up in lots and lots of ways. And then, sometimes you move on because it's great to be wanted. You got that new job, and so you move on. You get there, but then you realize, oh, they've also got their own dysfunctions, and it's not so green on the other side of the fence. And so you start to wonder, like, is it ever going to change? Am I ever going to feel like I'm actually progressing because I've now come to somewhere else and now I'm hitting the same kinds of things? So this is one that I think probably affects early career people more, but I think it doesn't really matter what stage you're in. There's always going to be a version of this that you're thinking about. And so let's move on to our next gremlin, is the imbalance gremlin. And this one's really, really important. I think that this is a gremlin that affects every single person, no matter what their role, no matter what stage of their career they're in. And this is the challenge that we face in trying to maintain a healthy work-life balance and avoid burnout. So I call this one, it's got two names. I call this one the sneaky ninja gremlin because I feel like this one is the one that kind of creeps up on you without you realizing, and before you know it, imbalance has sneaked into your life. And so for this one, it means that we work in very demanding roles. Agile roles are very demanding. And so we're trying to solve problems for our customers and build value for our businesses. And no matter what your role, but certainly for PMs, it means that you've just got a ton of stuff to do all the time. You're doing discovery, you're talking to customers, you're trying to check your data, you are managing your stakeholders, you've got deadlines to meet, you've got the customers who perhaps are unhappy, you've got your bosses who are on your case, you're trying to work with your agile team and make sure that you've got everything that you need ready for them. There's all these demands. You've got the hippos. Does anyone know that term? Yep, the highest paid person's opinion. You're doing the thing you want. The highest paid person's opinion rolls in and derails everything. And then the quarterly planning cycle comes around. Who's got those? So that kind of then ramps everything up because then you've got to do your Q1 planning, your Q2 planning, H1 planning. And so you're in so many meetings. When do you actually have time to do the actual work that comes from the meetings or the thinking that you need to do? All of that's going on. And has anyone here ever worked anywhere where everything is on fire all the time? All the time? Like literally all the time. And so if you have worked in one of these situations, what you know is you also have angry customers and the boss all at the same time wanting to know what the hell is going on. And so why wouldn't imbalance sneak into your life if this is kind of the cycle that we have every day, every quarter, every half year, and then the weekend comes and then you do it all again? Why wouldn't imbalance sneak into your life? It's impossible. So I think that the imbalance gremlin is definitely something that affects everyone. And I actually think that the discourse and organizations have shifted to a place where they are recognizing this, they're caring more about people's well-being and trying to put things in place to support people, well, to put better practices in, but also support people with this challenge. But I don't think we're there yet, right? So even in environments where it's very supportive and people care about your well-being, I think bad habits have been set in for a long time. And I certainly, early in my career, developed bad habits around work. And even when I landed in environments where that wasn't expected of me, it's just hard to unpick that. And so I just like worked. You know, there were points in my career where I worked, like Rihanna did. But it's a different kind of work that she's talking about, which we'll move on from that. That's not what I was doing. So things came to a head for me in November 2020. And it was in my first leadership role. As you all know, it was the pandemic year. I was telling someone earlier, it was probably one of the best and worst years of my life, my professional life. So I'd got this new job pretty much the week that the pandemic set in, and then everything shut down. Well, you all know what happened. And then I was doing a Rihanna the whole time as well. And there just came a point in November 2020 where I just couldn't do it anymore. I literally woke up in the morning, I was in bed, and then I just started crying. I was just like, what's happening right now? And so I burnt out, basically. And it's not an appropriate gift for this bit. So yeah, I woke up that day and I couldn't get up, and I started crying. I called my boss and I was like, I just can't do it today. And she was like, I wish you hadn't come to this. I wish you'd taken some time sooner, but take the time you need. They were very, very supportive, and this is what I mean. It wasn't an environment where I wasn't supported. It wasn't an environment where the expectation was to work in an imbalanced way, and yet I did. I ended up there. And so that was really the consequence of my bad habits catching up with me. I didn't burn out that day. Like November 2020, that day in November 2020 was not the day that I burnt out. There was a path up to that where I'd ignored all the signals and just continued and pushed through it and didn't talk about it and didn't tell anyone what was going on, just pushed through and pushed through and pushed through until that day in November 2020 where I completely just totally burnt out. And so, I don't want to put too much of a point on burnout because it's not everyone's experience. And the only thing I will say is that I hope, if it's not been your experience, I truly hope it's never your experience. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because I want people to notice the signs. I want people to think about the habits that they form and think about the things that they can put in place so they never get to that. Honestly, it's like a thing I wouldn't wish on an enemy. So that's why I really wanted to talk about it. Here's a definition of burnout that really kind of just made sense for me. It's quite an old one. It comes from a really old study back, they were talking about this back in the 70s, believe it or not. But this is a definition from the 70s. It's the consequence of chronic cumulative stress, which over time exhausts one's physical and coping mechanisms. And so what happens when you burn out, what happens when you burn out is you start to lose a sense of self. You get a brain fog, so your mental and physical health is all over the place. You're just not as capable. I don't want to use the word capable. You're just not as quick as you are. So things took longer. Things that would have taken an hour would take 2 hours, and it just took a lot more energy. And it affects every aspect of your life. It affects your relationships. And it affects your sense of self. And then, of course, you know that you're not being your best self, so you start to feel guilty on top of that, and then that just exacerbates the whole thing. And, it just becomes a bit of a self-feeding cycle, and that's kind of what you go through. So that's the imbalanced gremlin. I don't want burnout to be anyone's story. But if it is your story, this is a reminder that you should think about how the sneaky ninja gremlin of imbalance is getting into your life, because it's not a thing that happens overnight. It's a thing that happens over many, many days and weeks and months, and it's about your habits and how you change those habits so that you don't get here. So the next one is the last set, the major step change and fear gremlins. So this one is about what happens when you are progressing through your career. There's always points where you make a progression and you're learning new things, and that's okay. But then there are some, not all progressions are made equal, and there are some progressions that really can be quite taxing. So this is about what happens when big step changes are made and you are feeling that beginner pain again, which can be quite hard. So this happened to me at the point where I stepped into leadership for the first time. And it was a great experience, but like I said, pretty much the week that I was announced as head of products at Thales was the week that the lockdowns happened. I was in the States at the time, visiting some customers, seeing some universities, and then all of the universities started closing down. I got on one flight, and then by the time we landed at the next place, the NBA had shut down. The next university we were going to see was like, no, we're closing too. So I called my boss. I was like, I think I need to get out of here. And oh yeah, and then Trump announced a travel ban. And I was like, I definitely need to get out of here. So on a plane back to the UK, back home, and then we'd been talking about my transition to the role, and then it was announced that week, and then that was the week that the lockdown started. So I was like, yes, all of the hard work and the progression and the learnings I've been doing has culminated in me getting this leadership role. Yes, I can run the show now. And oh, there's this major global unprecedented thing happening at the same time. The entire company is locked away, and what a great time to be alive. Woohoo! So that was my introduction into leadership. So aside from, okay, the crazy pandemic stuff that was going on, there was a lot of other stuff that was going on for me. So basically, I just thought that there are just some very, very, the step here was just so large. Transitioning into leadership, I realized that like the fates of the company, the people who work for the company, all these people who had been like my colleagues and my peers and my friends over years, like I was now involved in making decisions that could affect their life. And not only that, we were doing that at a time where there was just so much uncertainty. And I know that I wasn't alone. I know it's not all on me, but like the weight of that kind of step into leadership was really, really playing on me. And so the self-doubt started to kick in. And then the other thing is realizing that like the things you learn and develop and the skill set that you've gotten good at, like you've developed your craft to a point when you're an individual contributor, and then you step into leadership, and it was like, oh, all those things, they're great, but like there's a whole new set of things that I have to learn. You're basically back at the bottom of a ladder of learning, whereas I've been kind of climbing that ladder of learning, feeling very competent, feeling very good at my craft, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm like at the bottom of this steps again, and so. We're all people who, you're all here at a conference. You're all people who have a learning mindset. I'm someone who I think I have a learning mindset over the years. I'm not averse to challenges and feeling like I have things to learn. But this time, it felt less like a learning challenge and more like a me problem, like a me capability challenge. And so I basically forgot foundational lessons. I forgot that it wasn't, my job to have all the answers. I'm working with a team. I forgot that I could be open and communicate with my team. I forgot to work in the open. So the failure stakes were really, really playing on my mind here. And what did this look like? I think outside, I kind of was powering through. No one knew what was going on. But inside, it was like anxiety all the time. And I wasn't looking after myself. So like the basic things you do to look after yourself, they were starting to, they're some of the first things that go. And I didn't ask for help, which I think is a really important one. Like if you're challenged, you should ask for help. So that's part of what led to my burnout, essentially. Also, that during that time, we took the company from being partially distributed to obviously pandemic remote, and then we actually decided to go fully remote during that period, and I was leading that as well. So there was just a lot of things that happened. So what does that feel like? The discomfort of beginning again. So that's what I talked about. You've gotten very good at something. You've been building your craft. You've been learning. You're getting mastery, and you're like, I'm feeling good about where I am. And then you get to that bit, and then you're like, oh, no mastery, starting again. And that's that discomfort that I was talking about. Then the second is the fear of failure. So what I was talking to, the stakes. So the stakes of failing at this level are so much bigger than the stakes of failing at the previous level. And that really, really weighs on you. And then I had like these moments of dawning realization. If you, I don't know if people here have children in your life or kids in your life. If you ever had that moment where you get to a certain age and then you realize that you're now at the age that your parents were at when you were that age, and you thought they knew everything, they had their shit figured out, they were like, you know, adults, but now you're that age and you're like, I haven't got a clue. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm literally the same age at that point that I thought my parents had all their shit figured out. Have you ever had that realization? Yeah. So that's what that felt like. Then when I stepped into leadership, I suddenly had a new level of respect and a lot of empathy for every single boss I'd ever had. And I don't think I was a bad employee. I think I'm actually a pretty good employee. But I just realized that there was like this whole part of their world that as an individual contributor, I was not involved in. I had no visibility into the decisions they were balancing, trying to be transparent, trying to be empathetic, trying to look after their teams, thinking about the bigger picture of the business. Like I just had no concept of that. So the moment I stepped into leadership, I started just realizing, oh my God, like this is what it means to lead. And so I developed that realization and that empathy for anyone who'd ever managed me. And then I started to think about the ways in which I was failing my team. You know, the ways I wasn't showing up well for my team, not being available for them, not trusting them. So, you know, that sense that of forgetting that I didn't have to have all the answers. That's a little bit of distrust of the team. So I was realizing that I wasn't showing up for my team in the right ways. And also you get that moment where you're in a room, you're the boss, the team is talking about something, and then you're like, this is what I think you should go this way. And I know that it's coming from my experience, but then I'm like, oh my God, am I the fucking hippo? Am I the highest paid person's opinion right now? No. Because I've been on the other side of the hippo, wondering why the hippo's like wading in and just tossing everything aside that we've been working on. And suddenly you realize that maybe that's you. And so these are some of the things that were going on. And so those are 4 sets of gremlins. I don't think that's an exhaustive list of gremlins. I just think that they are some of the ones that plague us the most, that show up the most. So, and that very first one, comparison and self-doubt, I genuinely think that's like the foundational layer upon which the rest of these are built. But if there's one thing that you take away here today, I think the imbalance one is the one that I would want you to, the comparison and self-doubt and imbalance are the 2 that I want you to really think about, like how is that showing up for you in your life? Because I think they're the things that really, you know, when things fall apart, that's where it comes from. It's certainly where it came from for me. Okay, so that's the gremlins. Let's talk antidote. Oh. This keynote to PowerPoint is not playing. Okay, so that's meant to be like a little test tube. That's like the antidotes. Anyway. Oh, no, it's done it everywhere. Okay, so the things I want to talk about are cultivating self-awareness. So we've got a talk later on today about continuous discovery. And so that's one of the things that's going to help you cultivate self-awareness. So you've got to basically create the space to reflect. This is like the really woo-woo part of the talk. I hope no one minds. You've got to create the space to reflect, and you've got to learn about yourself, which I know is like a lifelong endeavor. It really is. But there are some things that I've been doing to help me do that. So strategies that I've got for creating that space include, so if you think about when you're doing discovery, continuous discovery, it's about talking to your customer. Well, hey, you're the customer here. Talk to yourself, not in a crazy person kind of way where you're just like talking to yourself. That's not what I mean. I mean, really interrogate kind of what drives you, interrogate what challenges you, interrogate what makes you afraid, because that fear thing, it's happening a lot of the time. You don't know, it's just showing up in different ways, and you don't know that it's fear underneath it, but that's what's going on. So interrogate what makes you uncomfortable, what makes you thrive. Like, what are the things that actually really make you thrive as well, so that you can start to focus on those. So whatever you need to do that here, right? So I have in my calendar on a Friday, every Friday morning, 9 a.m. to 9:30, I've got a kind of like a personal retro. So we all do retros. I've got a personal retro that I do every week on a Friday morning. And sometimes it's very light touch, and sometimes there's a lot going on. I'm very privileged, and I can access therapy, and that's the thing that I do. That's not accessible to everyone, but it's a way for me to learn about myself. But whatever it is you do, I don't want to get all woo-woo about all the different things I do, but I think that whatever you do, you need to just figure out what your limits are, understand your own behavior, understand what makes you afraid, understand what makes you thrive, and figure out how to really understand yourself, because I think once you do that, then you know what's showing up. You start to see the patterns rather than the patterns happening and then you realizing that afterwards. So here's an example. This is not the one I do, but there's a guy called Dominic Yost. He's CPO at a company called Doist. I thought this was really great. I saw this the other day. So basically, every month, they send this out to everyone in the company. And it's a stress checklist, and I'm taking some of these for my personal retro going forward. So just ask yourself some questions periodically, just to check in on yourself. It sounds like so simple, and it sounds so maybe a little crazy, like why am I just going to ask myself a bunch of questions? But this is how you get to know yourself, just checking in on what's going on for you in your body, physically, in your mind. So that's one of the tactics here. So cultivating self-awareness is also seeking feedback and celebrating success. So a lot of us do things like customer research. We try and get feedback from our customers. So again, you're the customer here. So go get feedback about, or rather, you're the products and go and get feedback from other people. So an exercise that I did fairly recently, I went back to every single one of my bosses and asked them to answer 3 questions about my strengths. And that was amazing. It was, I did it in a moment where I really needed it, and it just gives you perspective. So we all have our internal dialogue, our internal self-talk. And so maybe put that away and go and ask other people, and you'll be pleasantly surprised by what they have to come and tell you. There's a reason that, you do the work you do, and you work with the people you work with who've given you the opportunities. So let other people gas you up, and remember to celebrate the successes. It's easy to always focus on the negative things or the things we think we lack skills in, the things we're challenged in, but try and reframe that. So one of the things I've been learning is things like affirmations, actually saying those things to yourself, and also a reframing technique. So if there's a statement or a thing that I'm thinking, trying to find 3 alternatives to that and going through that exercise, because it really does help you to kind of just reframe those negative thought patterns. So yeah, getting perspective is important, and getting that from other people is how you do that. And so the last thing I want to talk about is prioritizing self-care and self-compassion. So when I was talking about kind of like my burnout moment and the moments leading up to that, it wasn't that day, it was a bunch of stuff. And I talked about some of the things that go first are like your self-care thing. There's something called a shed, someone introduced me to. Your sleep, sorry, it's gone out of my head now. It's sleep, hydration, exercise, and diet. Like, it's the simple things, but are they all good at the moment? Whose shed is in order in this room? Put your hand up. every single one of them? Okay, all right. You're fine. The rest of you, there's probably at least one of those things that's probably not in order. So it's like the basics of your shed. For me, like, I forget to drink. It's like a natural human thing that we need to do. I'll have a bottle, and now it's got like times for how much I need to drink by certain points in the day, because I'm one of these people, I just forget to drink. I will be thirsty, but I don't know what it is. My brain doesn't connect to the fact that I'm thirsty, so I don't do it. So I have a timer just to remind me to drink. It seems ridiculous and simple, but like that's what it takes sometimes. Whatever your thing is that you're not paying attention to, pay attention to those things. And then I do other things, like I was once in an offsite with my team, and you know that moment where kind of everyone gets a little low energy, and we were like, what can we do to get more energy? And I was like, well, I've got this app that does breath work. I've never seen a group of people look more horrified. Honestly, so horrified. But you know, most of them got on board, and then we sat there and we did like a 2-minute breath work to like energize us. So that's a thing that I do. I'm not saying that that's a thing that you do, but I find it really, really good. I also do meditation. I make sure that I'm doing exercise. So these are like the basics, and I feel like I shouldn't be talking to a room of adults about basics, but hey, someone had to talk to me about the basics. So prioritize that self-care. It's really, really important. Whatever your thing is, it doesn't matter. There'll be whatever the thing that helps you is, but make sure that you are staying on top of it. And then the last thing I want to talk about is self-compassion. This is so important. We are like the nastiest people to ourselves. You know, do you talk to yourself in a way that you talk to other people, to your best friend, to your partner, to your kids, all the time? You probably don't. You probably talk to yourself like your worst enemy. So you have to find yourself doing that. You have to catch yourself doing that. You have to reframe that. And get accountability partners. Get people to help you with that. Because I think that can be one of the most damaging things that leads to that kind of self-doubt, that comparison factor. Self-compassion is really important, particularly right now. Like, it's really hard what's going on in the climate, in the economy, in our professions. This is a time to be compassionate to ourselves and to each other. So that's one of the things that I think we should focus on. Okay. Oh, yeah, this is I wish I'd read this book before I had my burnout. So this really stuck with me. So your focus on perceived failure, and this is the thing I mean about self-compassion, it's handcuffing you from taking the opportunity to experience further success. So the way we talk to ourselves gets us stuck in a place that actually we just could be moving forward and getting on to better things. And so I'd highly recommend this book. I found it really, really useful, and it had really tangible tips and tools to help you. Okay, so the second is about being intentional, so getting clear on what's important. And so what does that mean? This could be about your career path, so like what's important for you. This could be about what are your priorities. This could be about your values. So there's something called a decision stack by a guy called Martin Eriksson. He's a Swede, actually, based in London. And he talks about the decision stack in product management. So starting with the vision, the principles, then building your strategy, then building the things that you do to execute your strategy. So it's kind of like a product framework that I'm applying to us as humans. So start with the vision, start with the values. What is important to you? Get intentional and clear about what that is. So think about your principles, think about your values, think about your goals and your priorities. Build your growth roadmap. So if you're thinking about how you progress in your career, I'm hoping that wherever you are, there is some kind of growth roadmap for you. You know, you've got some goals, you've got some things you want to grow in. If that doesn't exist, do that, because that's the only way that you know where your gaps are and what to do next. And then I think the thing that also gets people stuck is about what's the right next type of place to go to. So I've been very intentional in how I've made certain moves. So I've been very guilty of staying, the thing I said about being comfortable. I've been guilty of that. And once I realized that, I was like, right, I'm going to be very intentional about where I go to next. So some of the moves I've made have been very, very specific. So I once went to a company called National Express, which is a big bus company. So they do city buses and intercity buses. And so I joined that team, and I went to that team explicitly for these reasons. At that time, I'd not worked in B2C. And so I'd done like my skills mapping of what I wanted to grow in, and I'd not worked in B2C. I wanted to grow my experimentation skill set, and at that point I was in like a small B2B SaaS company. We just didn't have the tool set and the skill and the capabilities and the opportunity for that. So it's like I want to go somewhere where the scale is so big that we could do that, where there's just that many more customers. I want to build that skill set. I also had been a product manager, like a solo product manager for a long time. So I was like, I want to work in a team where there's other product managers. And I want to work in a large organization where I learn what it is to manage other types of stakeholders. And like those were the things I was looking for. And I was very, very specific about what kind of role I was going to go for. So thinking about how you make your next move in those terms, it starts off with what are your skills, where are the gaps, which are the ones you're interested in filling, what types of companies are going to help you do that? So certainly in our industry, people don't know, you've got startups, you've got scale-ups, you've got very big organizations. They're very, very different. You're going to get very different things from them. So think about what it is you're looking for and which type of organization is going to help you fill that. And also thinking about the kind of product that's going to help. Is it B2C? Is it B2C? B2B, B2C? The number of customers, the scale of that product. These are the kinds of considerations I think help you really dispel the fog when it's kind of like, how do I progress? Which thing should I do next? Which products? Which type of products? Which type of company? These are some of the factors that can be helpful in that. And then the thing I'd say is ask for what you need. Like, I'm very cheeky. Like, I always ask for what I need. If you don't ask for what you need, you won't get it. But if you ask for what you need, you might not get it. But more often than not, you will get it. So I once, when I was a solo product manager, very new in the role, I was looking for a way to learn how to do this job and meet other people. And I found this product tank. I found this meetup in London. I lived in Birmingham at the time. So I once asked my boss to pay for a train ticket once a month, indefinitely, so that I can go and meet people who did the job that I did. I was like, I'll just see what he says. And he was like, OK. So I did that for about 12 months until I went to the organizers of that product tank and was like, can I just start one of these where I live? And they were like, OK. So then I started one of those and started to meet people where I lived and doing that. When I accepted the product leadership role, that my first one, I did so with a condition. I was like, I want this job, but I need you to help me be better at it. So I built in a condition saying that they would pay for me to go and do a CPO accelerator course. So I think you just have to get a little bit cheeky and just ask for what you need, be clear about what's going to help you, and ask for what you need. I think the worst that could happen is you get a no, but I think more often than not, you might get a yes. And then the other thing I want to talk about here is do not be constrained by where you are. No matter where you are, there's going to be something that's within your sphere of influence. And there's going to be a lot that's not within your sphere of influence, and it might be frustrating. It might not be the right way to be doing things, but there's going to be something that you can control, and that's your sphere of influence. So don't be constrained by where you are. Think about what you can control, or think about stepping outside of where you are and taking on new opportunities to learn about the business. Have that curiosity, learn about the business, find stakeholders that you can kind of tag along with, volunteer yourself for, so that you can develop skills, even if there are constraints around what you can do. So when I was at a company called VoxPopMe, we were quite a small team, and there was me, one other product manager that I was kind of mentoring, and I really wanted to develop that skill, but in such a small team, it just wasn't possible. So what I did was I actually started to do mentoring outside of that in my own time. So that was one way that I was like, I'm not going to be constrained by the fact that I've got a small team. What can I do? I'm going to go and do this. Once there was, we had some customers in a different company, some customers in Australia, and we ran a conference once a year in Europe, but it's quite far for our Australian and New Zealand customers to come to, so we'd run one over there. And the CEO and the CPO didn't want to go. I was like, I'll do it. I mean, there was the ulterior motive of getting to go to Australia and New Zealand, but that wasn't the only reason. On that trip, I got to meet so many customers at a level that I just typically would not get in the room to. So that really helped me develop the skills around how to deal with very, very senior stakeholders. So it's showing up in places in ways like that, in the organization, that you are finding new ways to kind of develop your skills, or just not being constrained by where you are. So that's what I want to say about how to be intentional. That can help you, particularly with the progression wall. So the next one is find community, and I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here. You're all here at a conference today. This is what it means to find community. But I think it takes a village to do a lot of the job that we do, to learn, to feel like you're not alone in something. I think is just that alone can be the most helpful thing. But find ways to find mentors, I think, and do that for the level that you're at as well. So I think events like this are great, meetups are great. There's lots of kind of online ways to do that these days as well. So I think whatever your role is, find the community of practice, because that's how you find peers, that's how you find mentors, that's how you develop, that's how you feel like, oh, it's not just me that's going through this thing. That's how you don't get into the comparison game, because you realize that like everyone's got their own thing that's going on as well. So I think this is really important, and over the years, the community that I've built around what I do has been really, really helpful. So when I did this talk for the first time, I had like so many peers who were just offering help, feedback, that kind of thing. When I've been looking for jobs, having that peer support's been helpful. I've had people kind of like mock interview me from my peer community. So I find it really, really valuable, and it helps kind of combat the self-comparison, the comparison gremlin, when you've got peers who are going through the same thing that you're going through. Okay? And then meeting your organization where it's at. Focus on the sphere of influence. I think we did. We talked about that one already. Try different challenges and stay curious. I think always be curious, no matter where you are, no matter what constraints you think you have, always stay curious. Meet the organization where it's at. Some of the most miserable I've ever been in a job is where, the organization's here, I think it should be here, and I'm raging against the machine rather than being present in the thing that I'm doing right then. So I think that's really important. That's it. Gremlins are comparison and self-doubt, just to remind us. Progression wall, imbalance, major step change, and fear. You may have experienced all of those. You may experience one of those. But remember those antidotes that we talked about. They're really good ways to just keep these things at bay, help you stay sane in our crazy jobs. And I've got a bonus gremlin, though, very quickly. Silence. That's the one that I think makes all of the others worse. It's one of those aggravating factors, because we don't generally talk about this stuff. Everyone thinks everyone else is great. Everyone else thinks everyone else is doing amazing. We don't talk about it when we're struggling. So at the end of the movie, they basically kill the gremlins with sunlight. So what I'm asking you all to do is to shine sunlight on your gremlins and basically talk to each other. And this happened for me at a conference that I went to. There's a guy called Dominic Yost, that guy who had the checklist. He basically interviewed a bunch of product leaders about kind of, their well-being and mental health. And then he pulled all that research together and did a talk where he basically talked about his own burnout. And that was the moment for me that led to this moment for me, where I was just like, oh my God, this guy is like a big deal, and he can go through this. It's okay. It's okay that I've gone through this. So just want to remind you all that you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, you're not alone. You are not the only one. It's perfectly normal. Our world is chaos. It's perfectly normal. But there are things that you can do to help yourself kind of get over these things. Remember to shine some light on it. That's it. Thank you very much.